Hello, everybody. Welcome to Torn Tuesday. My name's Justin. I'm
And
with Cliff.
hello, my name is Clifford. Hi, everybody. How you doing?
Cliff, I need to fix your Zoom. You're a little bit off to the side, but that's a little nicer. Now we can see your beautiful face.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
this is Torn Tuesday, your weekly dose of all things Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. We've been doing this show for over 7 years, over 400 episodes. We've been trying to keep tabs of everything that the filmmakers, video game makers, authors, publishers, artists, anybody that musicians that want to play in Middle Earth and do play in Middle Earth. We've had some wonderful conversations with artists and writers and cosplayers and craftsmakers and swordsmiths and the New Line executive team. And Richard Taylor has generously donated his time multiple occasions. Cliff, you've interviewed almost the entire cast multiple times, and boy, oh boy, are we up for a new era of fandom now. And I'm
Well,
sure
the
everybody part of this show has already seen the news and read the reports, and it is spreading like wildfire all over the internet, with comicbook.com now blogging it and generating thousands and thousands of more comments, tens of thousands of comments, thousands of retweets, over 1,500 quote tweets on their story. Cliff,
mm,
this is something
hi.
that we started to talk about last week. Did you, and did you ever expect the topic of sex in Middle Earth would carry on to the point we're at today?
Well, I never no, I never expected to be writing a think piece for the OneRing.net 20 years later, and for the first time using words like masturbate and uh, sexual assault or 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 fart. How about that? How about flatulence? I mean, we're talking about an idiomatic style of literature, an idiom of high fantasy literature, and there's a difference between your regular fantasy, like Orson Scott Card or Ursula K. Le Guin. Maybe Ursula is more capable and has proved many times more than others because she's a fantastic fantasy author. But we're talking about high fantasy versus The Witcher, for example. That's a good example. And you hear all that noise outside? Um, Here's the thing: we are a very active, ongoing fandom who are quite vocal. We are quite intelligent, and we're quite capable as a fandom of knowing knowing what we want, knowing what we like about Tolkien. It has taken how many decades? How many decades since The Hobbit was first published in the 1930s? It's amazing when you talk about it that this is a multi-generational fandom that has stuck with this author for a very, very, very long time
For many reasons, I
for
might
many
add.
reasons.
The
But
reasons you came to Tolkien and you stay with Tolkien may not be the same reasons that I do, and that definitely the same reasons my grandmother did not.
I know, oh, well, okay, so let's talk about that. Would your grandmother take a copy of 50 Shades of Grey and say to you as a little boy, hey, this is great fiction. You've got to read this? No, your grandma is much more likely to take a copy of The Hobbit and say, Justin, this is an extraordinary story. You're going to enjoy this. In fact, you know, there you go. I mean,
This book?
yeah, the reason why we're talking about a multi-generational fandom is because there is a reason, a very strong reason why we have stuck with our intense involvement with J.R.R. Tolkien for so many decades. And I'm interested in exploring those reasons.
And
because those reasons why we're with Tolkien, why we love his work, why his storytelling is so powerful and uplifting for us, that's what I want to talk about in context with adapting it to a television show. Because if the people adapting the TV show are not fully aware or not completely embracing the legitimate foundation of our fandom, the reasons, the whole raison d'etre. I hate to use a French phrase, but our reason for existing is because Tolkien has a multi-generational heritage with us. And it has all those reasons why we are attracted to his brand of high fantasy. It's different from reading Dragonlance. It's different from reading Patrick Rothfuss. It is incredibly different from Robert Jordan or George R. Martin. Thank you. I mean, I love me some, you know, T.H. White. I love the Mists of Avalon, which he did not write. I love the Once and Future King, and I love Frank Herbert, Dune, especially. I love all those things, but Tolkien is special. Why? Let's talk about why Tolkien is special.
we'll get into that
Why
real
is he
quick.
special?
But before we dive in to a deeper discussion of sex and Tolkien and Amazon, a little bit of housekeeping. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. I see so many of our regulars in the chat rooms. We are streaming live on Twitch, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, Periscope,
Yes.
all at the same time. I've got a chat room open with several of them. Cliff is following the chat as
Following the
well.
YouTube chat, I can see our
Following the
friends
YouTube. I
on
see
YouTube. Hi,
Facebook.
everybody.
I see everybody. So I see Tracy and Tammy. And I saw some new people. Mark Rosinger, greetings from Germany. Hello. Tracy Gart, Dallas Kennard. I see so many wonderful people. Daniel just said, feels like everyone is getting bent way out of shape based on a casting announcement that it wasn't even definitely for the series. There's a lot to unpack today based on the article. If you haven't read it and if you don't know what we're talking about, let me bring it up. Let me bring it up on screen right now. Um, the
Yes. Hello, Daniel. And
Cliff has
Irrealist.
published a wonderful, maybe 5,000 word um, article on the latest rumors of Amazon's Lord of the Rings series hiring an intimacy coordinator, fact check true, and a casting call for nudity, which is rumors. And we've got updated information. But Cliff, you dive deep into the research how Tolkien presented sexualized content. He didn't. How Tolkien positioned sexual content in letters to the editor, one of the most famous editors. So if you haven't read this article, feel free to listen to this conversation and jump over to the onering.net, which this article also heralds the brand new version 3 third age redesign. We are in the third age of Tolkien fandom after Lord of the
Mm.
Rings and the Hobbit movies, and we just launched our new design. It is much easier reading. We hope it's easier to find stuff that you're looking for, whether you're looking for collecting the precious, all of our posts about collectibles and the Tolkien toy community. We've got our latest tweets right there on the homepage, so you can see what we're talking about every single day if you don't have Twitter. And then, of course, at the bottom, we've got our Instagram feed. So the pictures automatically load up from Instagram. You can see that we've got some beautiful photos of Aragorn and Treebeard and Vigo and Alec Guinness and Ian Holm and so many people. So we are really excited to launch this new version of the onering.net. It
Yes.
should be a lot easier to use on mobile. The community tab is front and center with the message boards, the chat room, Happy Hobbit, Torn Live, and of course, the TV series, Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit, all have their own sections, and the library, which we used to call the green books. but now it's just called the library. It's for
Yes.
longer form reading. You would probably find a lot of these posted on Medium if you were a tech blogger. But we've got a lot of great poetry and things like that. So the OneRing.net officially relaunches with a new design this week, and launches with this great article on the latest rumors. The latest rumors. So Cliff, so let's lay out the facts here before we get into scholarship.
May
Okay.
I? May I? Or do you want to? Yes, go ahead. You go ahead. I'll just say that, yeah, we're talking about facts versus rumors, but ultimately, everybody wants to talk to Amazon Studios so we can make our voices heard and tell them what our expectations are. That's what this conversation is about. Why? Because we are the audience. We are the audience that they want. They want us to come to Middle Earth again. So we are the best source of information, aren't we? Don't you think the worldwide fandom, all these people of different ages and different cultures around the world and different identities and different nationalities, don't you think we're the people that they want to capture with this new show? So the idea of writing this editorial is not to get bent out of shape without, first seeing what they're producing. I can see some people in the chat are saying, why don't you just wait? Reserve judgment and wait and see what they do. Well,
Absolutely.
it
And
might
we
be too
did that
late. It
last
might
time.
be it might be too late by then. It might be too late
Well,
if we don't say something, if we as a fandom do not use this incredible platform to share our love for Tolkien, then how is Amazon going to know what we want as an audience?
well, we have a history of this because when we heard about Arwen being filmed at the
Yes.
set of
Okay.
Helm's Deep,
Let's
and
go
then we
back to
got
that.
photos,
Let's go back to Arwen.
of Arwen battling at Helm's Deep.
Yes.
There was such a fan uproar
Oh my God.
and without knowing the context or the story, just the photos of Arwen at Helm's Deep triggered fans so much that
Yes.
Peter went back and re-edited and reshot some of those scenes to remove her from Helm's Deep, and he thanked the One Ring and the fans for calling him out on his stuff for that. And reminder, The Lord of the Rings was written by the Oscar-winning team of Philippa and Fran. So they have reasons for doing everything. But but before we dive into that, Cliff, let's just lay out the facts. So we're operating on some ground rules, okay?
Yes. Okay. Let's
Fact.
begin. Let's begin.
Facts.
Facts. Facts.
Amazon has acquired the rights to Lord of the Rings in complete rights of everything in the books of the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit, everything in the appendices, and anything
Yes.
that is tangentially mentioned in the appendices. That's a fact. Amazon has the rights to exploit that. The Tolkien estate said if they are presented with a good idea, they are willing to license more stuff.
Mm.
And that is what happened. Amazon
and
presented an idea about the Second Age.
and that explains why we see the Silmarillion on Instagram over and over again with all the actors and actresses who are on the New Zealand set working on this production. They're not holding up copies of the Lord of the Rings. We have never seen the Lord of the Rings. They're continually holding up copies of the Silmarillion, which doesn't deal with the Second Age until you get to the Númenórean chapter, a Calabeth. Right.
That's right.
Right.
So those are the facts. So the Tolkien, also facts. Tolkien estate has refusal rights on the overarching topics and stories.
Okay. That is not the same thing as final script approval. That's not the same thing.
Correct.
Good.
And
All right, good.
Cliff, as you've worked in Hollywood for many years, as I have, you absolutely know that no studio in their right mind would give any license holder script approval. Like in
No,
fact,
that won't happen.
in fact, George R. Martin was, loved to hang out on set, and I'm sure he was frustrated that he didn't have script approval on some of those episodes of Game of Thrones. But that's the reality of the biz.
Hmm.
Amazon paid the highest price in licensing history,
Hmm. Yeah,
and it's
that's strange, but true. Yes.
so those are the facts. Amazon does not have script approval. Amazon only has approval to what, or the Tolkien
You
state.
mean you mean the estate?
The Tolkien state only has approval on what Amazon has access to, and they only have approval on what storylines they're allowed to develop. It
Mm, yes.
stops there. So, Cliff, true or false? If the Tolkien state signs off on the concept of Second Age Numenor and following young Galadriel as she unlocks the mysteries of the Second Age, the Tolkien state does not have rights to approve a script that would have sex in it.
You
They do
mean
not.
you mean they do not have the power to veto a script?
Correct.
Okay. What I understand, at least this is backed up by what Tolkien scholar Tom Shippey was uh, recorded saying on a German fan podcast, was that they're not allowed to break away from the fundamental historical chronology of important events that are significant to the timeline of Arda. So they cannot play fast and loose with Numenor existing like thousands of years later in the Third Age. They can't do stuff like that. They can't have Morgoth, the evil Morgoth, appear in the Second Age because he was captured by the Valar in the War of Wrath and imprisoned in the First Age. So they can't mess things up in this significant way that would represent altering the reality of the histories and the intrinsic timeline of Arda. So now that we've established that, the other facts that we know is that the working title for the Lord of the Rings show is not LOTR. The working title going forward is UAP, Untitled Amazon Project. And we also know that the studios have hired uh, a very talented, very well-known intimacy coordinator. And an intimacy coordinator, what is that? There are people who are in the chat asking right now, what is an intimacy coordinator? Well, her name is it Leland, I believe? Is it Jennifer?
Yes.
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 So Ms. Leland is a person who, and this is post Me Too movement. This is an important person who will be on the set to make sure that the mental health and the well-being, the emotional well-being of the actors and actresses who are doing something very vulnerable in front of a lot of strangers on an open set. An intimacy coordinator is there to make someone. Hey, kitty. The cat's in the background. You can hear him. Um, the the intimacy coordinator is not there for nothing. They only hire a person like that when there are scenes of nudity or sexuality. That person is there on set to confirm. Hey, buddy, how you doing? Hey, everybody, say hi to Pumpkin. Or he doesn't want to play. Hey,
Hello,
Pumpkin.
pumpkin.
He doesn't feel like being here right now. So, a fact. They are not doing scenes with an intimacy coordinator for no reason at all. They would not hire an intimacy coordinator if everybody kept their clothes on. That's a fact. So now
And
we know that there's a new element of nudity and sexual expression, which is not part of Tolkien's idiomatic world of high fantasy. That's not what.
intimacy coordinator. Let's just clarify it. Laser focus. Intimacy coordinator
Please,
is
please
not
do.
for a group of naked extras. It's not.
No.
If they show the birth of the elves as drawn, as painted by Ted Naismith,
Yes.
One of the best Tolkien artists out there. If they recreate the birth of the elves and a bunch of elven bodies, coming out of the sand and water, just completely naked in the buff, you do not hire an intimacy coordinator for that. There's nothing intimate about that.
Yes.
Intimacy coordinator is explicitly about sex scenes. That's it. That's why
That
they're
is
hired.
that's a
They're
fact.
there. They're there to protect the crew. They're there to protect the cast. They're there to go over best practices because
Yes.
there's no real sex. They sometimes they not sometimes they always wear flesh colored coverings of the really naughty bits, but it is
And
to protect the set when that scene is being filmed.
they are there to make sure that every actress and every actor is in complete ongoing consent with the choreography of the sex, because it is choreographed as mimicry, and that the coordinator is there to make sure that everybody is cool with it and that nobody is being violated in any way whatsoever, and that everybody is mentally, professionally on point for what they're filming. That's what that person is there for.
Also, the intimacy coordinator, when she is on set,
Mhm.
she's the second most powerful person on set.
Intriguing.
She has
Okay.
the most power to call cut, to close the doors, to kick people out. Only the director. Now, Cliff, you've been on many sets.
Yeah.
Only the director has power to just kick anybody out. Like
True.
ultimate power is on the director. But when it
True.
comes to intimacy scenes,
hmm
the intimacy coordinator uh, attains that power because it is the only thing that matters is of
hmm
the protection of our actors and
It's
and the
true.
performance. So this is a very important role. This isn't just like this isn't just like a nice little casting like, oh hey, we got, last week we reported on a visual effects supervisor, and the week before we reported on some design supervisors. This is way beyond that. So
It
this
is.
is a very, very important role. This
Okay.
is a very important hire, and it shows that they're taking this seriously. Now, uh,
hmm
but let's back up. We're getting into the weeds again. Back up, Cliff. They're taking this seriously,
Okay. Now
but
let let's get to it.
should they be taking this seriously? If they're really taking this seriously, would they even be making this hire? And what
Indeed. Indeed. No. We
did
also
Tolkien write this? Did Tolkien want this? Did
we need
Tolkien like?
yeah, we need to get to that. We need to get to that. That's the ultimate bottom line. Besides us as a fandom, expressing what we want and what we expect from a TV adaptation, what did Tolkien expect when other people would start adapting his works? I take a look at take a look at that Zimmerman script that was handed to Tolkien when he was alive, and how many changes were made to the story, and how Tolkien didn't like it at all. I mean, it was weird, and it had so many structural changes that were against the spiritual and thematic approach to it. And Professor Tolkien was not fond of it really, and he talks about it in his published letters. What would Tolkien say right now if he were alive and he was aware of Game of Thrones? I mean, I don't know. I can't predict what Tolkien would say. But
Well,
what I did say in the article is what Tolkien said to his publisher,
yes.
and that's the most important fact of all. Milton Waldman asked Professor Tolkien to explain to him why he should do a combination publishing of the Silmarillion, and also at the same time combine it with the Lord of the Rings. So John Ronald Reuel went and wrote a famous 10,000 word letter to his publisher saying, this is why I have these ideas of this cosmology all connected and why these stories serve one another thematically and idiomatically. It was so specific, and it's a famous, famous piece. Milton was so fascinated by it that he had his secretary type up a typescript version of the letter to keep it permanently and refer to it many times. That's how fascinating it was to the publisher. And Professor Tolkien said, I have purged my stories of the gross. It is a sense of a high romance, a high meaning an elevated story. And there it is on the screen, ladies and gentlemen. He says, do not laugh, but once upon a time, when my crest has long since fallen, I had a mind to make a body of a more or less connected legend, ranging from the large and cosmogonic to the level of romantic fairy story, the larger founded on the lesser, in contact with the earth, the lesser drawing splendor from the vast backcloths, which I could dedicate simply to England, to my country. It should possess the tone and quality that I desired, somewhat cool and clear, be redolent of our air, meaning the clime and soil of the northwest, meaning Britain and the hither parts of Europe, not Italy or the Aegean, and still less the east. And while possessing, if I could achieve it, the fair, fair elusive beauty that some call Celtic, though it is rarely found in genuine ancient Celtic things. It should be high, purged of the gross, and fit for the more adult mind of a land long now steeped in poetry. I would draw some of the great tales in fullness and leave many only placed in the scheme and sketched. The cycles should be linked to a majestic whole, and yet leave scope for other minds and hands wielding paint and music and drama. Absurd. He actually said that.
He
Professor
said
Tolkien.
he said that, and he says it should be high, purged of the gross, and fit for the more adult mind. Now that's the key sentence to the topic at hand. It should be high, purged of the gross, and fit for the more adult mind. What is gross to Tolkien? What is gross to Tolkien? Um, Dr. Demetra on
Mhm.
Twitter, one of the foremost Tolkien scholars, could not find any use of the word nudity in any of Tolkien's works.
In the History of Middle Earth series, Morgoth's Ring, there's discussion about the customs of the Eldar. The customs of the Eldar, including how they make family units, how they bake bread, how they live together in a society, how they get married, and how they decide to approach matrimony, coupling, and procreation. So, yeah, Professor Tolkien does talk about sexual expression in a metaphysical and specific way in these unpublished notes. I mean, while he was alive, they were not published, but Christopher Tolkien edited this material together.
That's
In
right.
in the Lord of the Rings, there's some nudity, as is talked about in our live chat, and I mentioned that in the article too. There's the moment where Frodo and the other three hobbits are released from the clutches of the Barrow Wight, and because they've been crushed under this evil horror and the spells of the Witch King associated with the Barrow Wights, and their spirit has been touched by the darkness. Tom Bombadil says, take off all your clothes and run naked in the grass. And they do. They run naked in the grass as a therapeutic thing. It is a metaphysical, therapeutic act
Yeah, I
for the
don't think
hobbits
Tolkien had
to be
an
healed
issue with
metaphysically.
nudity.
No,
Yeah,
no, the nudity happens every now and then, even when there's in the Tower of Cirith Ungol, and
that's right.
Frodo is being represented as vulnerability. The vulnerability of Frodo by him being tortured and naked. Um,
I
you
don't
know,
think the issue is nudity,
that's
and I
not the
don't
issue.
think anybody has
That's
an
not the
issue with
issue.
nudity, and I don't think any fans have an issue
No.
with nudity. Now, there are some some more conservative minds that want to watch this show with their family, and they can understand. I can understand the apprehension of showing nudity, but I think in general, currently, right now in the year 2020, fandom would be okay with that because Tolkien was okay with this. What we're not okay with
Mm,
is the idea that an intimacy coordinator is necessary because Tolkien, again, purged of the gross.
well, that means that's why people don't masturbate in his stories. He does not describe people going to the bathroom and taking a pee behind the bushes, or pleasuring themselves. Professor Tolkien was really, really, really Roman Catholic. He was extremely, um, let's describe him as a man of faith. He was a man of great faith.
Not only was he a man of faith, he was so hardcore Catholic that when his best friend in the whole world, C.S. Lewis, became a Christian and invited God into his heart, he chose a Protestant arm of Christianity
Instead of Catholicism, and that that
instead of
was
Catholicism,
that
and they
was a big
didn't
problem
talk
with them.
for years. And they didn't talk for years. Tolkien
Hold on.
was offended
Okay.
that his best friend chose another form of Christianity instead of
He,
Catholicism.
he,
So this is how hardcore he was.
Professor Tolkien would recite the Mass in church, and he would shout back in Latin very loudly when the church had changed from Latin Mass to English, and he was not happy with that. So he was sitting in church, and everybody else was being adjusted to saying the response, the call and response from the congregation, and instead of responding in English, he would be the one person in the cathedral shouting back at the priest in Latin. That's how Tolkien was. He didn't
Yeah.
he didn't he didn't want it to be modernized. So we got this. Now, let me lead you guys carefully through this, because
yeah,
we know we know why the
but
intimacy coordinator is there, but we have to ask ourselves and discuss, at what level do we want sexual expression in Middle Earth that
there's
is
two. But
outside the scope of what Tolkien wrote? Do
yeah,
we
there's
want
two
that?
parts of it. Did
Do we
did
want
did
that?
Tolkien want it depicted in his stories? That is part of your fidelity to Tolkien conversation. And the second part is, are we as fans ready and prepared for tasteful romantic elf story as he just described Tolkien in his letter? He said he had a mind of making a huge cosmogonic story all the way down to romantic elf story. So Tolkien is all about that nice love story, and movies from Braveheart to everything else did wonderful with their depiction of romance. And who's to say that they're not going to that this isn't going to
Okay.
be a beautiful romantic lovemaking by
No, no, no,
characters
no, no,
that
no.
we
Look,
adore?
the
But
the no, the conversation among all the fans in the live chat is talking about the moral degradation of Numenor. Okay, what is the reason that Numenor fell? In Tolkien's stories, Numenor had a spiritual fall from grace, and there was a split between the entire population. There was a larger portion of the population who were faithful to the king, or the line of kings of Numenor, and there was a smaller segment that lived on the further western shore of Numenor, and they looked to the Valar, and they were faithful to Eru. And this was a schism that Sauron was able to exploit when he arrived in Numenor. This
that's
is
right.
part of the story. Okay, it is fascinating that we might want to talk about sexuality or sexual hedonism or debauchery as part of the moral failing, quote unquote, about the Numenorians, but I'm not sure that's what Tolkien wrote. My understanding was that they were desirous of eternal life that the Eldar had. The men of Numenor were jealous that they were stuck with a mortal life, and they were jealous of the elves who had an immortal life. It was about the metaphysical, spiritual decay of Numenor that got to the point of
Look, I
human
think
sacrifice.
I think it
Wait,
was
wait, wait.
a
Let me
part
finish.
of it.
Let me finish. I don't see anything in the Numenorian stories about orgies or debauchery being part of their spiritual decline.
It doesn't
What
mean
is
it wasn't there, and if audiences
it's
are
not written.
prepared for it, then I'm okay
It's
with
not
this.
written.
Oh,
It's not
and
written.
for the
Tolkien did
last
not write
3
that.
years, I've told you, Cliff,
No. What he wrote
this
about,
show will
was
show the
human
depressed.
sacrifices. He wrote about people being killed at the top of Menel Tarma, the mountain in the
You're
center
gonna
of
tell me
Numenor.
that
He
they
talked
would
about
do
human
that in their
sacrifices.
society, but they won't
Uh,
res-
all right.
go into the carnal
No.
knowledge
No. Okay.
of life.
Here you
So,
go.
but
Here's the way that Tolkien mentioned the word sex. He mentioned the words. What was it called? What were the words that he used? They were words like not even. He didn't even use the word procreation. He used a word about continuing. Oh God, I need to look it up. In fact, I'm going to look it up right now. Thank you.
purity,
No,
purian.
no, I'm
No,
talking about what he wrote in Morgoth's Ring, the History of Middle Earth books. Okay,
Bruce in the chat room says romance, not coitus, and that basically wraps it up. I
begetting.
think,
He used the
and
word the begetting. The begetting. Let me read this to you.
the begetting,
Also,
Tolkien's own words.
the elder say that in the begetting, as in the begetting of children, and that's his word for the sexual act. Begetting. In the begetting, and still more in the bearing of children, greater share and strength of their being in mind and in body goes forth than in the making of mortal children. Professor Tolkien is telling us that sexual expression among the elves is metaphysically different, that their mind and spirit goes forth in the act of begetting. Even to the point when Feanor was born, his mother died because she gave up so much of her spirit and her life because the child, when the baby was born, Feanor was a spirit in an Eldar that was stronger, more fiery, and more intense, and it caused her death in childbirth when
Okay,
Feanor was born.
let me ask you this. This is
So
a great point,
it's
Cliff.
all metaphysical.
Yeah, but okay. So, Cliff, let me ask you this. You just described that Numenor. Part of the fall of Numenor was the fact that they were very violent and they had public crucifixions and things like this. So,
Why?
Cliff, the
For
question.
Morgoth. Because instead of worshiping Iluvatar, they were worshiping Morgoth.
So
It
let me
is
ask. So let me
Satan.
ask
It's
you this.
Satan worship.
So if
Satanic worship.
Amazon filmed that, you wouldn't have a problem because it's true to Tolkien, correct?
It's true to Tolkien. That's the
Okay,
point.
so let me ask you this. If you are apprehensive about nudity and sex in this series, but not about violence and murder, then I question how much you care about it being family friendly. And
Hmm.
so that
Okay.
was from Timothy in the chat room.
Okay,
So
Timothy. That's a good question, Timothy. It's a good question.
what is better for children to see? Intimacy between consensual partners or decapitations and mutilations, even if it is true to Tolkien?
What?
Even if it is supposed hedonism of Numenor, which is better? Are we really comfortable in saying that sex is worse than violence?
No, that's not the conversation. It's not about sex being worse than violence. You could put that litmus test onto the R-rated version of the Battle of the Five Armies, where Peter Jackson shows a lot more blood and decapitations and a lot more gore, to the point where The Hobbit becomes an R-rated film. That's a problem. That was not.
Decapitation is rarely consensual.
Yeah, let's just say that. No, I really appreciate the point, but we're not in a comparison game about whether this is not a comparative equation between violence being apropos of Tolkien or prurient. Prurience. You know the word? Prurient? It means, thinking with the smaller of your two heads. Thinking and living and acting with the smaller of your two heads. Okay? In my article, if it has not been read by all these people, great, please take a moment to read it. But that letter that I just read, letter 131, he uses words about poetry, majesty, redolent, and these things that are elevating. It is to be high fantasy, not low fantasy. All right, look, in a book that Orson Scott Card wrote in the early 80s, I think it was called
Ooh, are
Worms.
we? I don't think we're supposed to talk about Orson Scott's card on the
No, we're
same way
not.
we're supposed to
But
talk
in
about J.K. Rowling right now.
no. In the book Worms, the protagonist is a, a young girl who has a little secret bauble, a little crystal globe, and to keep that secret MacGuffin, it's like the ring. Instead of it like being the one ring, she has a little glass bauble, and to keep the enemies from getting it, she swallows it. She swallows this thing. It's like a MacGuffin for the story, and then Orson Scott Card writes a whole paragraph about how she goes to the bushes and takes a dump and then starts picking through her excrement to get the little bauble out of her poop. All right. Would you guys ever want Tolkien to write a paragraph about how Frodo decided to hide the ring from the enemy and the orcs and swallow the ring and then dig out his poop 2 days later or a day later?
Which he
Would you want that?
probably
Would
did.
anybody want that?
He
I
probably did.
ask everybody. No, we didn't. No, that's nuts. Shut up. Professor
He
Tolkien.
didn't write it down.
No, Professor Tolkien never, ever would. And the point is explained because he's very deliberate in how he's writing this idiom of fantasy. Professor Tolkien does not want his fantasy to be like that, where Frodo
Purged
is
of the gross, as
purged
you
of the gross.
said.
I mean,
Purged of
I'm
the gross.
seriously,
So let me
seriously,
ask you
no,
this. Go back to the question of the decapitations. Are you telling me that a decapitation isn't gross, but a consensual lovemaking is?
hey, no, consensual lovemaking exists in Middle Earth everywhere. It's all over. But Tolkien keeps it off stage. Why? Ask yourselves why Professor Tolkien wrote that the act of coitus between elves was something that exhausted their mind and spirit. And it was like
It
something.
exhausts my mind and spirit, honestly, sometimes.
Okay, now why? Thanks, but why? Why would Professor Tolkien keep all of that stuff off stage and not even use the word flatulence? The word fart. The word fart does not appear anywhere in Tolkien. So I'm not trying to say that the glorification of violence and the human sacrifices in Numenor would be better or more family appropriate. They might not be. That's a decision for every parent and child to talk about between themselves. It might not be appropriate for families. But putting in carnality and the kinds of things that we saw in Game of Thrones, the kind of, people in Game of Thrones getting their genitals chopped off and being sexually assaulted, that is not anywhere close to the idiom of high fantasy that Tolkien was playing with. That's just not Tolkien. And
So
I,
why did he write depictions of beheadings and things like that? Why
oh,
did he
you mean like
write
the
about incest and rape?
yeah, because that's those are parts of the stories that he wanted to reflect. Those big Celtic, ancient, poetic stories where that stuff happens in the Icelandic Eddas, it happens in the Kalevala, it happens in the great ancient poetry, in Beowulf. These stories are even in other mythologies around the world. Okay, breathe, everybody, breathe. Okay, everybody, breathe. We're at a point where they're going to
I,
spend $1 billion. They're making this TV show. This is happening. Like I said in the piece, the tracks are laid and the train is coming down the tracks. So this is our time as a fandom, as a community of people who have been reading and breathing and loving Tolkien
and and
stories.
and,
It
and
is time for us to say what we love about Tolkien and what it is that brings us to his world. And if we do not articulate what it is that we want in a TV series, then they're going to give us what they think we want.
I,
So
I
there,
I
there you go.
agree,
There you go.
as of our reporting last week, if you were watching the show, Amazon has sent the pilot back to reshoots. They've paused production on the entire series, and the pilot is still going through reshoots. So they're not even comfortable in the pilot yet. So this is the moment in time to make our voice heard and to tell them what they want. But Cliff, again, look, we're
Yeah.
ready for this. Look, the second age is full of rape and incest and beheadings and
Yeah.
debauchery and
Just like Greek,
Numenor and
just like
everything.
Greek mythology, just
Just
like
like Greek
Norse mythology.
mythology, Celtic mythology, Norse
Yes,
mythology,
yes,
that he
yes.
he pulled
That's
from the greatest of stories. So
yes,
again,
yes.
if I'm not clear, then Amazon is definitely not clear.
Okay.
Please help me understand why you're okay with having rape and incest and beheadings and all that stuff, but you don't want to see an intimacy coordinator direct a lovemaking scene.
I never
I
said
like
that.
where
And I never said I did not want an intimacy coordinator there. I just said that the fact that they are making casting announcements for nudity, and they do have a person on set who's a professional who is well regarded and well respected. Ms. Leland is there to protect the actresses and the actors from emotional, psychological damage, or from anybody in the production doing something that's not cool. That's what they're there for. I think that's amazing. It's
yeah, they're
very
doing
helpful
it
that they
right.
are there.
They
That's
are
doing it right.
absolutely doing it
Okay.
right.
So please,
So
yeah,
so
please,
what is
please,
your
yeah.
what is your issue? So what is your issue then?
My issue is by example of John Borman's Excalibur, okay? Because John Borman was going to make the Lord of the Rings and he couldn't get to do it. Instead, United Artists gave Ralph Bakshi the Lord of the Rings. John
Ralph
Borman
Bakshi
wrote.
X-rated Ralph Bakshi. Let's
That's
remind
right.
people the
Let's
first
remind people.
X-rated animated. Ralph
Yes.
Bakshi is the dirtiest of dirty filmmakers. Okay, just
Let's just say
watch
he's
his
the
movies.
Ralph Bakshi is the king of TNA, and all of his
Yes,
characters. That take a look at Fire and Ice. Definitely take a look at
lots
Wizards
of nudity in there.
and the way the characters are designed. Look at the characters in Wizards and the way the female fairies with their voluptuous bosoms and their erect nipples coming through the fabric of their clothing. Ralph Bakshi did not do that with Galadriel. He did not do that with his Lord of the Rings because, as a storyteller, Ralph Bakshi clearly knew the idiomatic expression of Tolkien was different than his wheelhouse. And so he did it. He did it right. Maybe he did it wrong, but I'm not.
The king of rated R animation.
I'm telling you. I'm telling everybody right
Respected
now.
Tolkien so much
Okay.
that he did not put that in Lord of the Rings.
I don't have an issue with sexual expression in Middle Earth.
Okay.
I'm pointing out that Tolkien has a quality, the quality of Tolkien that actually makes him J.R.R. Tolkien is because he doesn't do the stuff that is on The Witcher or Game of Thrones. He does not do that. So, even if you're going to have human sacrifices on Men Tarma and Morgoth worship, and even in the Return of the King, where the enemy, the armies of Mordor, use the catapults to chuck all the heads of the victims back into the Gondorian city to terrorize. That is the most evil and ghoulish bit of terrorism that the orcs could have had,
That's very
could have
Game of
done.
Thrones. That's
It is.
that's
It
like
is. It
putting
is very Game
Sean
of Thrones.
Bean's head on a pipe.
Yep, it is. And that at the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, Tolkien is not shy about brutality. But my point is that what is grotesque and what is brutal and what is vulgar, according to Tolkien, is reserved to the enemy. Those who are corrupted enemies, those are monsters. The enemies, the spiritual enemies and the physical enemies are the ones who are doing everything that is vulgar and obscene. In Tolkien's presentation of the world, the heroes never, ever participate. And that makes the overall impact, very judiciously used. It is carefully calibrated, very deliberate, calibrated use of cruelty and what is vulgar and it is limited to the enemies of the free peoples, so that you get that essence of the difference between good and evil. That's Tolkien. That's his style. That, excuse me, that is his idiom. So if you're going to have a TV series that disregards that, then you need to think twice about why you're adapting Tolkien. And I'm just saying, we are the fandom that are in this position to say what we like most, what we are attracted to in the world of Arda. That
Well, that's
tone,
different than
that
Tolkien's
that
intent,
tone.
because I want to see all this. I want to see some elves get it on. But you're telling me if we
Say that
see
out loud
some,
one more time. I want everybody to understand that this is Siskel and Ebert. We are such an odd couple, okay? This is Felix and Oscar, okay? This is why we're such.
but
This
you're
is
but
Bert
based on
and
what you just
Ernie.
said,
We have
that
such a
the
difference here.
vulgar, if the vulgar is withheld for the evil in the world, you're telling me that if this is actually to get a couple costumed orcs smashing together, then that's true to Tolkien and you're
All right.
okay with it.
I need to go back to John Borman, because John Borman had the chance to make Lord of the Rings and he didn't get that. It was given to Ralph Bakshi. And guess what happened? We, as a fandom, were spared something insane. John Borman wrote, I mean, he was in the middle of Zardoz, and after Zardoz, with Sean Connery, he went and did Excalibur with Helen Mirren, Patrick Stewart, and Liam Neeson. Okay? And John Borman puts all this brutal, like rape and sexual assault and all the stuff that's in Excalibur. He put that in the script. I have 10 minutes, about 10 minutes before we launched our live show today, I had a friend read me the script of the orgy scene between Galadriel and the Fellowship. Now, I'm going to put this out there. John Borman wrote a scene where all the Fellowship arrive in Lothlorien, and they have not met Galadriel yet. They don't know who she is. And they all find this beautiful pool of water, and then they all get in the water, and they're all swimming, and they're all naked, and this beautiful woman rises up out of it. And it's like the Lady of the Lake. It's very much the King Arthur stuff of the Lady in the Lake. Galadriel is who she is, but nobody in the Fellowship knows that. And she comes out of the lake, and everybody in the Fellowship gets turned on. They get aroused. Everyone wants to have sex with her. And then Boromir and Aragorn are not able to, quote unquote, activate, the young gun. Okay, they have this erectile dysfunction, and John Borman put
just come into.
Yeah, you did. Hello, Chris. Nice to see you. John Borman put in a scene where the only person who was able to have sex with Galadriel was Frodo. So Frodo had sex with Galadriel, and off in the distance, Gimli is pleasuring himself. No. You guys need to hear this.
I'm done. I'm done. I'm
need to
done
hear
listening to this. No,
I
I don't.
want to hear it. I want to hear it, but I just came in this conversation, and the first things I heard were erectile dysfunction and Galadriel having sex with
That's
Frodo.
Right. Because Boromir, because in John Borman's script, Boromir and Aragorn were considered not spiritually strong enough to be with Galadriel. So Galadriel goes off and she has sex with Frodo. And it's insane. It's absolutely insane. So I ask all of you, does anybody want that? Does anybody want somebody coming up to a J.R.R. Tolkien adaptation and doing a John Borman number with it? If we can talk about this as a community of people and be honest about what we love about the literature, what attracts us to Tolkien, what is that beautiful, rarefied air of Tolkien that makes him unique among other authors, if we can talk honestly about that, then Amazon hopefully will listen and they'll understand what is that special quality. We do not want Game of Thrones, particularly. We want it to be Tolkien. And if John Borman had gotten away with doing his stuff, his Lord of the Rings would have probably destroyed any chance of future adaptations, and we might not have ever gotten Peter Jackson doing his 3 films.
Look,
so
John
seriously,
John Borman did not do Lord of the Rings.
He did not. He did not. But I'm telling you, that is a physical, concrete example of how it can go wrong.
Okay.
That's a very concrete example of how it can be done wrong. Now you
This
know.
conversation is wrong because my mind is lesser for listening to your story about John Borman. We are joined now by the co-founder of thewondering.net, Kalasuri, who has worked extra hard this summer during quarantine to redo the website.
Nope. Nope.
No, he didn't.
Nope.
But
That's
Thankfully-
right. Funny. Nobody wants a Sense 8 movie in their Lord of the Rings story. I don't think anybody really wants that. But okay, I get it.
Actually, I did help by saying yes. That's my to the redesign of the One Ring. That was my contribution.
And you helped put together this article that Cliff published this morning.
I did, but let's talk quickly about the redesign because I do want to give the props out to Gary, Gandalf Gary.
Good to see you, Chris. By the way, it's good to see you. I'll be right back.
Good to see you, Cliff. All right, I'll give you a break for a sec. But Gary put together this really great redesign. It's version 4, if you count our very, very first one that I did, ancient history ago. And I think it's awesome. There's going to be a lot of people out there that might be familiar with how to make websites or how to put stuff together. But I'll tell you what, the One Ring is extremely unique in that we've existed in some form of another since 1998, and the data has managed to stay there through that whole process. So like from the articles before any kind of database driven system all the way to now where you have a powerful system like WordPress. It's amazing to me that one of the pioneering fan sites still has that content available. So it's it's super cool and it's pretty exciting. And thankfully Gary was able to figure all of it out and put together into a new site.
So if I go to the Lord of the Rings tab on the new website at theonering.net, you can go all the way back to page 647 with a news article about Hobbiton is being built in Mata Mata, April 11th, 1999.
It's pretty crazy.
Oh gosh.
So anyone can relive the excitement of every news bit.
Yeah, if you dig into the really old ones, I mean, there's, a lot of us, Cliff, like when we were writing at that time, it's so funny to like read what you wrote and like being like, I have no memory of this place.
I know, right? You know what, Chris? There were a lot of articles that were removed from the Green Books to be special exclusive features in the published paperback version, where we took our library of articles and we published The People's Guide to J.R.R. Tolkien. So we might have to go back in and restore some of those.
I have 2 boxes of those sitting right over here.
Yeah.
Behind that wall.
Hey
I
guys,
love them. I love it.
Clicked on a random article and from April 20th, 1999, it says, the official hunt for extras in Peter Jackson's The Lord of the Rings will begin this weekend. Official casting calls will be held shortly. Ads will be placed this week, says Wingnut Films spokesman. Now, how does that compare to the casting call that we just got this week of like, you must be comfortable with nudity? It's complete.
And what's funny is I was just watching Frighteners. Peter, like at the time, no one really, except for a very few, knew who Peter Jackson was or what his work was. And there was a lot of doubt and concern about handing the reins of the Lord of the Rings to someone who basically was a, B-level horror flick guy.
Remember the lawnmower stunt with the zombies in Dead Alive?
Yes.
He holds up a lawnmower and it's like a torrent of blood and
and you have all these like exactly. And the big fat baby was so nobody knew anything, right? Nobody knew what Peter Jackson was, and Frighteners was his biggest, like I think it was his biggest budget film of the time,
made by Universal.
Starring Michael J. Fox and John Astin, Sean's father.
Yep. And the crazy guy,
Arlie Army.
no, well, he's in there, Arlie Army. Cliff, what's his name? The psycho guy, the main villain in Frighteners. Jake Busey, right?
Yes.
Gary Busey.
No, it's Jake.
Is it
No.
Jake?
Look it up on IMDb.
Man.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm too
So,
lazy.
yeah.
I'm too lazy to do that now.
I honestly think we're in a better position with Lord of the Rings series. I trust J.A. Bayona at this point in his career, after watching The Impossible and a lot of his other movies,
Mhm.
Monster Calls. I think
I love A Monster Calls. That is an elegant and sad movie. It's really good.
The Impossible is an
Really good.
amazing movie with Ewan
Yeah.
McGregor and Naomi Watts. Amazing movie. Any parent will cry.
It
at
was
that
Jake.
movie. And
It was Jake.
It was Tom Holland's first movie. And J.A. Bayona directed that, and it's on a bunch of streaming services for free. Watch The Impossible, because after watching that, you'll be like, all right, we're in good hands.
Yeah, I expect that. It's just this topic, right? You know, in a time in which we're in violence porn, right? You know, we basically have violence porn in pretty much every show. Great latest example, which is great. I mean, I love the show. It's one of my favorite shows, The Boys. It's not Thursday yet. Okay, tomorrow. Finale's tomorrow. But you know, it's like these lines that I think we're going to look back at a time frame here and say, wow, look at the lines they like almost unabashedly crossed, and they didn't need to. Like, it didn't have to be as violent or as sexualized. That's what took me out of like Boardwalk Empire. I remember one of the Boardwalk Empire episodes was literally just a porn for like 40 minutes, and there was no plot. I remember sitting there watching this show and going, I think I'm just watching porn. I don't think I can move the plot along here. If I there might be better options for me right now. So, you know, there's that line, right? I wish in this production that it wasn't, let's be like Game of Thrones, because for me, I know a lot of people like Game of Thrones. For me, Game of Thrones was there was a variety of areas of it that I didn't like, and therefore I didn't watch the series. I would just find summaries of it. And I don't want overly violent things and overly sexual things in Tolkien's world. Like, I'm fine with violence. You know, Peter Jackson chops off left and right with a PG-13 rating. You know, but
until he got his R.
But then I'm not fine with, you know, sitting there watching someone get disemboweled and focusing on it and watching it flow out. And you know, there's a difference between those lines, and I think it's the same on the sexual side and the intimacy side. A lot can be implied. You know, we have a conversation going, Cliff. I don't know if you saw it yet, from Demos in our staff email list. So he has a counter, a little bit discussion related to your article today, which I'm hoping he'll write an article. But ultimately, you know, there's these other pieces that come into play. But all of that doesn't mean let's get them naked and doing it on screen. It's so I gotta hope that that isn't what they're doing.
Yeah, well, we wrote this that people can be prepared. Everybody who is part of our fandom needs to be prepared that this is going on. And in the chat, it's been said a few times that it is still not a confirmed casting call related to the LOTR project. But in Auckland, that's the only game in town. We've confirmed, and even through the actors' unions, that over 80% of all the production that's going on in Auckland is strictly on Amazon's Second Age series. And that leaves
we did
hardly anybody left to go and work on other shows.
We did get confirmation today from some other fan sites of Cowboy Bebop, the anime, which they're turning into a big feature series on Netflix. That they're shooting in Auckland as soon as Lord of the Rings releases those stages.
Yes.
And so some of the casting and their code word is jazz.
So we made a mistake in our article that we referenced the jazz show, but it's actually a different program that they're producing. That we have to fix that.
I don't think it's a mistake because those nudity casting calls have been up for 2 months, and Cowboy Bebop only just started casting a couple weeks ago. So I think they're just trying to,
because maybe they're not shooting yet on Cowboy Bebop.
They're not shooting yet, but
so
I was just thinking a lot of the comments on Facebook, and literally there's been over 10,000 comments on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. This has become such a lightning rod issue, and this issue has brought into focus everything about the Hollywood and Tolkien and literature conversation. But my question is, a lot of the comments are like, I planned on watching Lord of the Rings with my children like I always have. And my question, I guess, I don't have kids. I have a niece, 9-year-old niece. We watched She-Ra, Princess of Power together. But Cal, sir, I believe you have kids. Do you watch any prestige television with your children?
Prestige, what do you mean by prestige television?
Like, we're talking about large format shows like like Watchmen or
Watchmen, Game of Thrones,
the Dark Crystal, Age of Resistance. Yeah.
No, but I'll tell you what, that is one of those critical pieces that the One Ring has championed over the years. Right? The idea that everything we put out as the One Ring, it's not Tolkien necessarily, but it's inspired by him. Everything we've done, we've tried our best to be, quote, family friendly.
Absolutely. That's why I was shocked to have to write what I wrote last night.
So
kind of
when you're talking about this community, it's really weird to even have this conversation. It's like, how does anybody think this is going to be okay? Because I remember, Cliff, remember the early days? We'd have kids coming to the events, and actually I shouldn't say the early days, continual now. Kids get into Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and Tolkien at 8, and sometimes earlier, kids who could read really well. And that process, that's young, that gets them into reading literature. It's family friendly, and it's inspired so many people. It just seems crazy to me that anybody would claim to be a fan of that world and those works, and then want to add adult elements to it. Of course there's adult themes, of course there's adult concepts, right? But the key is you're addressing them in a way that help younger minds learn about those things, learn about evil in the world, learn about evil people, topics that also learn the innocence of love. There's these pieces that are really define Tolkien. I mean, you just random guy on the street talk about it. That's the definition of it. Anybody who's going to watch this show, if it is, again, we're talking about if, right? But if it goes down this path, it's not going to recognize it. And in fact, it's unfortunately going to be unsuccessful. And unfortunately, the entertainment community would look at it as, oh, well, we can't do Tolkien. It's like, no, you just didn't do it right. So it's look at Lord of the Rings as a great example, from Peter Jackson, and mimic that. If you want to bring something, everybody loves that. There's no reason to go too far over the edge.
Indeed, that's why we mentioned letter 131, because it is the words of J.R.R. Tolkien himself. He explained to his publisher and later on to the world what his reasoning was in keeping an idiom of his storytelling. Somebody in the chat, hello Jason, said nudity and gross violence in a fantasy world is classified as a different fantasy genre, right? And that's an interesting distinction. Is there a distinction between high fantasy and regular fantasy? I think so. I mean, when I read and watch the Neverending Story, when I read Star Wars books and watch the Star Wars films, I don't expect or want the same
Right.
kind of fantasy that I get from Game of Thrones. Those are different.
Interesting tweet just popped up. I wanted to read this for everybody. The Nation is one of the leading news political magazines. I mean, they are middle of the road. They are totally legit. They are up there with the Associated Press. The national affairs correspondent for The Nation, the magazine The Nation, which should be preoccupied with a lot of other things going on in the political world right now.
Hey, we're a lot
has
of
taken
distractions.
has taken time out of his day to quote our article saying it's hard to think of a more sexless literary work aimed at adult readers than Lord of the Rings, so this seems like a mistake.
Good point.
And it's
It
not
almost
that
feels like-
Tolkien wasn't sexless, he just didn't want to
Yeah.
write about it.
It feels like there is definitely a category, an area for folks who enjoy taking these works and making them sexualized. Remember, like we would take suggestions from fans for content over the years, and we'd have to have a filter, right? A lot of people want to see the love affair between two main characters and want to talk about it and write slash fiction. That was what it used to be called. I don't know what it is now, but
It's
we
still,
ever
I think
allow
it's still
slash fiction on our message boards?
no.
We've always
Tumblr
been
had
family
plenty of it.
friendly, but there's places for that to be, and I think, you know, I come from I'm now marketing a lot, right? So from a marketing perspective, this is one of those cases where you poll an audience. Hey, J.R.R. Tolkien, is there any nudity in that? And 95% of the people say, no way, man, that'd be weird. And then and then you from the marketing focus group say, guys, we shouldn't do this. Hey, hold up. Let's pause a moment. Let's do some amazing cinematography. Let's do some amazing battles, you know, and other ways to make this step out from everything else. But these things don't mix, and they're not going to part of what are we coming up on almost 80, 100 years of fandom, right? Like it's you can't change that by saying, oh well, I own the world, I'm Jeff Bezos, and you know, I want to get my slash fiction out there on TV.
Well,
I mean, that's really what it looks like to me if that's what's being pushed through.
Yeah.
And it's just, you know, hey, you much money, how about you just go buy a country and help the poor people a little more instead?
I like that idea. A lot of people are saying that maybe this is a split. Maybe it's time for a fork in the road where we have some Tolkien and stories that we consume with our children, and some that are branched out and are something more mature and a lot darker and a lot more different. And there's room for that. Obviously, there is room for that. But
there's room for that.
they don't have the license. They don't have the license for this. So just because the Silmarillion has Turin and Nienor and their unfortunate incest and all the other stuff that happens, I mean, they only have like allegedly
they can
the
go-
Akalabeth. They
go
only have the
adult.
Akalabeth.
And let's be honest, even within the OneRing.net, we made that split in one capacity. And that was with the Oscar parties. And I remember it was kind of a big hullabaloo that everything about the One Ring was family friendly, and we worked really, really hard. The team of volunteers that donate their time to moderate the message boards and everything to maintain a clean and safe environment for families. When we said that the Oscar parties were adult only, there was a little bit of a pushback. Not a little bit, there was a lot.
Justin, let's frame that correctly. They were adult only based solely on the requirements of local government.
Because we were selling alcohol at the party.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like
booze.
If every single one of those conversations was, how do we get families involved? Not, we can't get families involved. That's a very big distinction.
Okay.
Yes.
That's a very big
Yes.
distinction. And every single event we put on, we're always trying to make it family friendly. The Griffith Park, you know, Baggins birthday celebrations. I mean, you guys, there's 500 people there, right? I mean, like, or that one year. So I mean, like, it's it, it's just one of those things. It's just so confusing to me. When I look at when you look, you're able to step back as a consumer, look at products that are being offered to the public. Usually, you can get a good gauge. Like, yeah, that's not going to work. Like, that's simply just not going to work. And
Hmm.
you think of the money that's being spent, and potentially wasted, in starting and stopping and figuring things out. When really, if if you if you just stuck to the mythos of the entire world, you have something amazing to play with, like amazing playground. Like, there is so much there, so many characters and names and things that are built in already that has a success. I'm going to
Chandler,
predict this. I'm going to predict this. The show is going to have a great launch, right? Everyone's going to want to watch that show, right? They want to see the pilot. They may, and that's going to dictate the theme of everything, right?
Hmm.
If there's any nudity in that pilot, and if there's any excessive gore, like outside of what we saw in the Lord of the Rings films, I predict it's done. I think you half the audience every week from then on, and you don't ever really get good numbers out of streaming service numbers, right?
Hmm.
Out of you don't really know what their viewership is, but you'll be able to tell in the communities and in these boards. Something like The Boys, which came out of nowhere, to the pop culture in general. Yes, there was the hardcores who followed the comic and knew it was a comic, and knew it was awesome and funny and whatever. But then Amazon had a hit on their hands, and you saw it everywhere. All of a sudden, it's everywhere. You got 3 seasons, whatever.
Hmm.
I expect, if they go down this path with LOTR to this more adult, in this more adult way, it's not going to happen. It's just
yeah.
gonna fade.
Cameron in the chat room says the moment Middle Earth turns into Witcher is the moment it will die as a show, and I think that's accurate.
Exactly.
Also, I want to say
Well,
that one of the
fair point.
part of the genius of Peter Jackson's movies, both trilogies, is that he took so much effort at the beginning of each trilogy. The first hour of each trilogy is note for note perfection of fidelity to Tolkien. It's perfection to the book. It's perfection to respecting Tolkien. That first hour of The Hobbit is just absolute perfection. The first hour of Lord of the Rings is absolute perfection. I mean, we're basically seeing the words of the page put to screen with no extra stuff. It's just Tolkien
Remember,
on the screen.
yeah.
Hmm.
Remember, I went to the Cannes Film Festival, and I saw that film reel before anybody had seen anything, right? So, and those are my exact words almost. Like, they, Peter Jackson managed to literally extract the visions of my reading of the book and put it on screen, right? That tone, the world, everything was there. I'm telling you, if I saw a moment in there where there was, Galadriel opened her shirt or whatever, right? That would have ruined that, like that, for every single person in there.
Well,
So
that's why I feel like
that's where we're at with this.
the pilot is so important. The two-part pilot directed by J.A. Bayona has to be so hardcore true to
Hmm.
Tolkien. I mean,
Hmm.
the pilot has to be lifted straight from the text and nothing else. Because you have to get people on that pilot on those first two episodes.
Hmm.
If you respect Tolkien in the first 2 hours, we'll go along with you wherever you want to take us.
Good
Indeed.
point.
And if you don't, then people are going to start having the conversation, and that means clapback and a response that they might not want, of people saying, "Don't you understand Tolkien? You guys who spent $1 billion on this, don't you even understand the source material that you're working with?" Nobody wants to see that eventuality happen, and that's why we're starting this conversation now. We have confirmation facts, and we have rumors that are yet to be confirmed. We understand there's a reason why they hired an intimacy coordinator, and we also are not going to mince words. We've seen other people in the past take their hand to paint and music, art, and make Tolkien adaptations. And there's been a lot of them. Rankin and Bass cartoons, Ralph Bakshi animation, and Peter Jackson making 6 films. And there's been audiobooks and even a musical, a big musical that failed. And all these other people, they all managed to stick their toe into the waters, and they did not do a John Borman thing where people are disrobing, and sexual energy and sexual expression is now all of a sudden part of the fabric, when Tolkien was deliberate in taking all of that stuff out of the fabric. That's what we're talking about now. So the fans
Peggy has a
have to give their expressions to Amazon before they go too far down the road.
I just saw a great comment from Peggy, Fred Peggy, in the Facebook chat. Tolkien's work should be honored in the way we all know what he'd prefer. I never understood why people think desiring sex and nudity in films is a sign of maturity. In my opinion, it's a sign of being juvenile. And that's so true.
Yeah.
it's so true. Thank you, Peggy.
Let me ask you this as we wrap up the conversation here, Cliff and Chris, do you think if we had confirmation that Tom Shippey was still on set, kind of, as part of production, do you think that your nerves would be a little more calm about this topic?
I guess so, but I also, as we age and experience the world, and know that there's $1 billion riding on this, you don't know. I don't know. I can tell you this right here on this stream for everybody. The one advantage the One Ring has had through our entire history is we've never, ever been bought by anybody. We've never amended our opinions, our comments, because of some benefit. And it's because of how this community was founded. It was solely founded on a not-for-profit. Now, we unfortunately aren't 501c or anything, but no one makes a penny from their art. Like Justin can tell you this, Cliff can tell you this. None of us have ever made a penny from this. It's our passion for Tolkien that drives us to be participatory in this community. Yes. And have so many volunteers that help us do these events. If people thought we were on the take from any production at any point, that doesn't work. And that's a really key component here. We are a long-standing community. There are very few left that have not been bought, that haven't traded ownership hands. We've had the same 4 founders since the very beginning. Mm-hmm. And we've had the same core staff from the very beginning. We don't sell out. And I can tell you this right here. We are going to report and talk about this honestly throughout the process, even if someone offers me $1 billion. so I think I'll keep you updated if I come back next week with like Amazon shirt and no otherwise.
Yeah, that's true. We've never been corrupted by the shadow of somebody else's money or capitalistic urges. Never. So thank you for saying that, Chris. That's great.
Because it's a key component, because so much is driven by, like, you notice the new design. Anyone notice anything interesting on the new design? Come on, guys, what's not there?
I like the new design a lot.
Ads. There's no ads.
Oh yeah, that's right. And there's never, oh gosh, wow, I noticed that.
We used to have ads. Yeah. Used to have ads. Do you know why we don't have ads? It's because we do not want to be accountable to anybody.
Yeah.
There is no reason in 2020 and beyond that we need to muddle our website with ads all over the place. We're going to support small businesses in the Tolkien realm. We're going to support Middle Earth Enterprises and these entities that share this vision, Tolkien's vision through the world, we're not gonna be beholden to anybody. And so I think it speaks volumes in 2020 that we just did a redesign and we don't have any ad space. I don't know if anyone
Mhm.
noticed that, but that's exactly what I'm talking about. We are simply not purchasable, and that is unique in the founding and the pioneering communities that
Do
existed
you,
on the internet from the
there have
start.
been a few
So
comments. Do you think it's appropriate for fandom to dive this deep into rumors and hints and allegations? I mean,
we've done it our that's our whole history.
That's what we do. This is
That's
what
what
we
we do.
do. Thank you.
This literally was go back to the archive in 1999 and review the insanity of all of that fandom for the next 21 years.
Yep.
every
Um,
whisper of everything got an article.
yes. No, it's true. That's true. And I will say one thing. There has been cases where, as a personal favor, like to someone who had a sensitivity, they're like, "Hey, if you posted this, this is going to be a problem for me and my family, or something along the lines." Where that goes in line with what we believe. We're not going to hurt somebody. We're never going to do that. So there have been instances where we made a really bad joke one year on the Oscars about I think it was someone losing an Oscar, and they reached out to like, guys, that's really hurtful. Please, it
Hmm.
was it was and we removed it.
Hmm.
But I'm just saying it's unique. Wondering is so unique
It
in
is.
this
It is.
whole frame of things. And yes, we're putting pieces together, but the other parts of this is we have sources that we can't talk about, right? So we
That's
have
true.
other places, other people. Cliff and I, we've met some people in person. We've done things, right, that we know the the behind the scenes. Um, in fact, it's just we wouldn't put an article out this if we didn't think it was completely plausible. So that's why it's there.
Right.
And like I said, the staff. I want the staff to write the counterpoint. Maybe I want a diversity of opinions from Tolkien fans out there.
I do too. In fact, we
Um,
have reached out to other Tolkien scholars in other countries to participate and provide counterpoint, which used to be one of our best, series of articles that Anne Wynne was doing on our previous green books was her counterpoint. And it's excellent to encourage the fandom to bring their opinions so that we can really get to the core of it. The core of it is let's identify what Tolkien is to us, what is special about J.R.R. Tolkien, and identify what we want to see in other adaptations. Yes, there's lots and lots of sexuality and interesting things that are in other tales of Middle Earth that are far, far away from the tone of The Hobbit and even The Lord of the Rings. But now we have to talk and identify what do we want from 21st century massive prestige format television show, because we've never had TV adaptations of a series of Middle Earth, and we've never ever gone to Numenor and the Second Age. So we are in uncharted waters. Amazon is in uncharted waters. Maybe this conversation can be mutually beneficial for everybody, for all of us. It does not behoove Amazon Studios to spend $1 billion on a prestige intellectual property, and then for them to play fast and loose with it and not listen to the fandom and then alienate them all. That won't do. And it does not do for us to just sit here passively as a passive fandom, which we are not, and say nothing at all about our concerns and our interests in the magical storytelling and the power of Tolkien. It has a power over us. I'm telling you, there isn't a mom or dad on earth who would not be like, yes, these are stories that I would read to my child when they're very young. And these are stories I want my child to read when they're a little older, going from The Hobbit to The Lord of the Rings. There's a progression of connection between generation older and generation younger. And I'm not talking about putting on a puritanical litmus stripe on
Right.
Tolkien that always has to be according to my taste. It has to be according to Tolkien's powerful and deliberate expression. And if you don't do that, then you have adapted some other story. You have gone and made, like I said, you've made The Witcher mixed with Riverdale, and you just slapped Middle Earth coating on it as a branding.
You know what?
Well,
You know
we
what,
don't want
Cliff?
that.
You hit on something there that I never really contemplated.
Mm.
Tolkien does have a progression of his literature
Mhm.
for the reader,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
You really do have entry level Hobbit, teenage level Lord of the Rings, adult level Silmarillion. Like you
Mhm.
have these, you have this progression, and I don't
Like
think you
Potter,
can say that with most. You don't say that with most writers and
with most,
authors.
yeah.
I mean, Tolkien clearly is not most authors, but
Mhm.
it's just interesting when you look at it that way. Did C.S. Lewis have a progression like that?
I don't
No,
think so.
Lewis's Narnia stories stayed very much within the framework and the idiom of what that was, and then all of his other
Right.
stuff was wildly different and not for children, and not even that. It was different. It was
Yeah.
very different,
How
like
interesting. I never
religious
thought of it. I
commentary
never
and
thought.
things.
Kate in the chat room says, what would be the point in spending so much money on this if they don't stick to it? Yeah, I mean that's exactly it. So
Yeah, you're buying the world, right? You're buying, and that world comes with some constraints. But just look what Peter Jackson did.
Mhm.
You can work within those constraints, like, and you can make magic, right? You can make Oscar-winning, amazing cinema and film, and TV.
Mhm.
Just it's not that hard. Just stay within those confines.
That's right. Well, that's the
Wow.
Green Dragon gossip as we've heard it this week for Torn Tuesday. I want to thank Callus Surrey, the co-founder of the OneRing.net, QuickBeam 2000. Follow him on all the socials, QuickBeam 2000. You can tweet at him directly what you really think of his article. And of course, check out the new redesigned OneRing.net, the OneRing.net. Bookmark it. It's got no ads. We're trying to treat you guys right because fans have always treated everybody else right. And all we can ask out of Amazon is treat Tolkien right and treat the fans right. And this is going to be a winning show. And your $1 billion is going to get you $10 billion. Oh, everyone has to feel that we're treated right and treated with respect.
Wonderful.
This is Torn Tuesday. We're here every Tuesday, 5 p.m. Pacific. This has been an extra long conversation because it's an extra heavy topic. We've got an amazing show for you next week. I can't wait to announce it. But before that, we've got an amazing announcement tomorrow. If you thought
Tomorrow's a special day. Tomorrow's a big announcement.
If you thought the news was crazy today, wait till you see the news tomorrow.
A lot of people know already. But we have an exclusive. We have a special thing that we're going to present tomorrow. So everybody join us for more mischief.
Palate cleansing announcement.
Palate cleansing. That's a good way to put it.
Everybody is desiring. So stay tuned to the OneRing.net tomorrow morning. I think you're going to like what you see. We've got a great new site. Thank you, Callus Surrey. Thank you, QuickBeam. Thank you all for joining us from all over the world, staying up so late in Europe and Africa to watch us, and Brazil. You guys are wonderful.
And Uruguay. Thank you, everybody, for being up so late with us. Thank you. It's fantastic.
Everywhere. It's so good. This is
Wow.
Torn Tuesday.
Good to see everybody.
I'm Justin. That's Callus Surrey. That's QuickBeam, and we'll see you next week.
This is Clifford signing off. Yeah, thank you, Chris, for joining us. And until next time, everybody do take care of yourselves. We like to say good night and good luck, and also buenas noches y buena suerte. Bye, everyone.